In the vast, unpredictable expanse of the East China Sea, stretching across a staggering 1,000 kilometers of turbulent, deep blue waters, lies a fractured and isolated archipelago. This is not a solid, contiguous landmass that offers easy shelter, but a scattering of over 160 solitary islands, standing like forgotten sentinels against the overwhelming power of the ocean. The Kuroshio Current, a massive, warm, and relentless river flowing forcefully within the sea itself, continuously batters these shores. It brings vital marine life, but it also serves as a constant, undeniable reminder of nature's absolute supremacy. Here, the ocean is not merely a scenic boundary or a distant horizon, it is the absolute dictator of existence. This is Okinawa, Japan's southernmost prefecture, a subtropical realm geographically, historically, and culturally severed from the hyper-efficient, concrete-laden, and neon-lit metropolises of the mainland. From the elevated perspective of a high-altitude vantage point, these islands appear as the shattered fragments of a lost continent, tenuously clinging to the surface, fringed by razor-sharp coral gardens and submerged in a deep, unforgiving sapphire abyss. The atmosphere here possesses a heavy, tangible quality. It is thick, saturated with a dense humidity, carrying the metallic scent of salt spray intertwined with the faint, sweet decay of tropical vegetation, hibiscus, and plumeria. As dawn breaks, the light does not violently pierce the landscape but diffuses through a persistent, soft, coastal haze, painting the world in muted, earthy tones long before the sun reaches its blinding zenith. In this deeply isolated environment, time itself seems to warp and stretch. The inhabitants have developed a profound psychological and social mechanism known locally as Uchina Taimu, Okinawa time. To an outsider, this might be misinterpreted as a mere relaxation of schedules or simple lethargy. In reality, it is a fundamental survival adaptation. In a volatile region where sudden, violent squalls can blacken a brilliant blue sky in a matter of minutes, rigid human timelines are utterly meaningless. The rhythm of life is forcibly synced not to the ticking of a mechanical clock, but to the unpredictable breathing of the ocean, the shifting trade winds, and the relentless heat of the subtropical sun. Before the sun even threatens the horizon while the islands are still swallowed in a deep, indigo darkness, the small fishing villages clinging precariously to the rugged coastlines begin to stir. There is no chaotic alarm, no mechanized roar of modern industry breaking the silence. Instead, there is the methodical, deliberate preparation of a people intrinsically bound to the sea. The traditional Sabani fishing boats, small but remarkably resilient wooden vessels engineered centuries ago to safely navigate the treacherous local coral reefs, slip quietly into the dark, rolling waters. The men who operate these boats do not speak in loud, commanding voices. Their movements are practiced, silent, and deeply respectful of the dark, heavy waves beneath them. They are venturing into the powerful Kuroshio Current, seeking the day's critical bounty, tuna, bonito, and elusive reef fish in an unforgiving environment where a single miscalculation can be instantly fatal. By the time the early morning sun breaches the horizon, casting long, sharp, dramatic shadows across the ancient, wind-carved limestone cliffs of Cape Manzamo, the Sabani boats return to shore. The catch is immediately transferred to the Machigua, the vibrant local markets. Here the atmosphere undergoes a sudden shift from the solemn, silent vastness of the ocean to the intense, communal energy of terrestrial survival. The Machigwa is the pulsating, chaotic heartbeat of the Okinawan community. Unlike the hushed, hyper-organized and sterile supermarkets of Tokyo or Osaka, the air here is thick with the raw smell of freshly caught fish, damp earth, and the sharp, acidic tang of local citrus. The shopkeepers, predominantly elderly women with warm faces deeply lined by decades of exposure to the relentless sun and salt wind, orchestrate this daily chaos. They are the undisputed matriarchs of this society. They precisely weigh out fresh vegetables, slice heavy. Dark red flanks of tuna with surgical, inherited precision and continuously exchange vital community information. They know the names, the lineages, the triumphs, and the unspoken struggles of every single customer. This is the precise intersection where the physical nourishment harvested from the sea meets the essential social nourishment of the community. In the narrow, winding lanes of the island neighborhoods, the physical architecture perfectly mirrors this psychological landscape. Homes are demarcated not by towering, impenetrable steel fences, but by gusuku, low, incredibly sturdy walls constructed entirely from porous, fossilized coral limestone. These walls stand as a physical testament to the islanders' intimate, inescapable relationship with their environment. They literally build their fortresses from the ancient bones of the sea. The Gusuku serve a vital, dual purpose. Their staggered structure breaks the devastating horizontal force of the typhoons that regularly scour the archipelago, yet they are deliberately built low enough to allow conversations and line of sight to flow freely between neighbors. They offer necessary physical protection without creating social isolation. Behind these rough coral walls, an older resident might pause their morning labor to pour a steaming cup of sanpincha. The act of pouring this local jasmine tea is a deliberate, daily ritual of grounding oneself. The thin steam rising from the ceramic cup carries the sharp, floral scent of jasmine slicing through the heavy, oppressive coastal humidity. When a neighbor walks past the low gusuku, the tea is offered instinctively, without a second thought. This incredibly simple act is a micro-expression of a much larger, foundational cultural philosophy known as Yuimaru. Yuimaru translates roughly to a spirit of mutual help and deep cooperation, but in the context of Okinawan survival, it is the absolute, non-negotiable bedrock of their continued existence. In an isolated, harsh geographic environment highly prone to devastating natural disasters, fierce individualism is a fatal vulnerability. Yuimaru is the invisible, unbreakable safety net that catches the community when the natural environment attacks. It is the coordinated, grueling effort of a dozen men repairing a roof torn apart by a cyclone. It is the silent, expected sharing of a surplus harvest of mangoes. It is the collective, watchful rearing of the village children. The elderly in Okinawa are not sequestered away in silent facilities. They are the active, venerated, and fiercely protected pillars of this Yuimaru system. With their deeply tanned skin and hands heavily calloused from a lifetime of manual labor, they meticulously tend to the communal gardens, their movements slow but relentlessly efficient. They do not merely survive, they lead. They are the living repositories of complex oral histories, traditional survival skills, and the fading indigenous language, Uchinaguchi. They sit under the shade of banyan trees, watching over the children playing in the quiet, sandy lanes, ensuring that the next generation inherently understands the delicate, dangerous balance required to live in this beautiful, unforgiving place. This deep-seated communitarianism is not a romantic, philosophical ideal. It is a hardened, necessary adaptation forced upon them by history and geography. It is the exact blueprint of how human beings have managed to not just exist, but to stubbornly thrive on a fragile scattering of rocks in the middle of a restless, violently beautiful ocean. To comprehend the psychological resilience of Okinawa, one must first strip away the modern political boundaries and look entirely to the unforgiving sea. For centuries, this scattered archipelago was not a subjugated southern outpost of Japan, but rather a fiercely independent, sovereign maritime nation known as the Ryukyu Kingdom. Situated at the precarious, storm-lashed crossroads of major East Asian maritime trade routes, the islanders did not view the ocean as a moat of isolation, but as an infinite, liquid highway. The kingdom evolved into a highly prosperous, cosmopolitan hub, absorbing the cultural and material wealth of Imperial China, feudal Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and Southeast Asia. In an era defined by brutal territorial conquests, the Ryukyu Kingdom mastered a different, far more complex mechanism of survival: diplomacy. They understood that their landmass was too small, their resources too scarce, to sustain protracted warfare. Their primary defense was their absolute indispensability as neutral, maritime brokers. This historical reliance on complex trade and constant negotiation rather than armed conflict has fundamentally hardwired a deep, enduring pacifism into the genetic and cultural memory of the islands. This distinct, non-combative lineage forms the absolute core of their identity, encapsulated in the indigenous term Uchinanchu. Translating directly to sea people or people of the rope, it is a stark, literal description of their historical reality. The rope refers to the thick, salt-hardened rigging of their ancestral trading ships, the physical lifeline that kept them tethered to their wooden vessels in the midst of crushing Pacific typhoons. It also signifies the unbreakable, invisible tether that binds the living to the dead, the present generation to the ancient past. The legacy of this independent kingdom is not buried in forgotten ruins. It is aggressively visible in the physical landscape of the modern islands. In the heart of Naha, the structural remnants of the former royal palace, Shuri Castle, stand as a defiant architectural monument to their diplomatic genius. The massive, sweeping roofs and the hyper-vibrant vermilion lacquered walls do not merely mimic foreign styles. They represent a highly calculated physical fusion of distinct Japanese and Chinese imperial design languages built to appease and impress passing foreign envoys. The thick, fortified stone walls, cut directly from the island's ancient fossilized coral bedrock, enclose a space designed not for siege warfare, but for the intricate, high-stakes theatre of international diplomacy. The vivid red of the towering structures cuts violently against the deep, subtropical green canopy and the expansive blue sky, serving as a permanent visual anchor to their sovereign past. The cultural identity forged during the Ryukyu era is actively preserved today through labor-intensive physical arts that demand absolute submission to the natural environment. The traditional Bingata textiles are not mass-produced commodities, but the result of a grueling, toxic, and incredibly precise chemical extraction process. Artisans crush local minerals, boil toxic plant roots, and harvest specific sea life to extract brilliant, unyielding pigments. These raw elements are forced into rough hemp or cotton fabrics using elaborate hand-cut paper stencils. The resulting patterns, intricate overlapping depictions of crashing ocean waves, indigenous migratory birds and blooming flora, are not merely decorative. They are a visual, wearable encyclopedia of the island's fragile ecosystem, permanently dyed into the fabric through hours of repetitive, agonizing manual pressure under the intense subtropical sun. To truly understand the emotional frequency of Okinawa, one must listen to the specific, haunting resonance of the Sanshin. This simple, three-stringed instrument, traditionally covered in the stretched, dried skin of the deadly, indigenous Habu pit viper, is the undisputed, soulful soundtrack of the archipelago. The acoustics of the tightly bound snakeskin create a dry, sharp, and deeply melancholic plucking sound that physically pierces through the heavy, humid evening air. The Sanshin does not produce joyous, major chord anthems. It generates slow, descending, hypnotic melodies that perfectly mimic the relentless sighing of the ocean wind across the limestone cliffs. It accompanies ancient folk songs that serve as the island's true, unedited, historical ledger. These are not songs of military victory, but raw, unfiltered oral documentation of catastrophic typhoons, the agonizing loss of fishermen to the deep Kuroshio Current, and the deep, inherited sorrows of a historically conquered people. This historical and emotional weight reaches its absolute physical peak during the annual Matsuri festivals, particularly the Asa dances of the late summer Obon season. During the most oppressive, suffocating heat of the year, the islands do not retreat into the cool shade. Instead, troops of young men and women bound tightly in heavily layered, suffocating traditional garments take to the blistering asphalt of their local villages. The physical exertion required to maintain this ritual is staggering. They carry massive odaiko drums strapped to their bodies, beating the heavy leather skins with a ferocious, synchronized violence that reverberates deep within the chest cavities of the onlookers. This is not a highly polished performance designed for foreign tourists. It is a highly aggressive, rhythmic, physical ritual designed to literally vibrate the ground beneath them. They dance to summon the spirits of their ancestors back from the unseen realm for a brief, exhausting, and highly emotional communion. The sweat pouring from the dancers' faces, the raw, blistered skin on their hands from the wooden drumsticks, and the relentless, hypnotic thud of the drums create a visceral, trance-like state. This extreme physical act reconnects the modern youth directly to the ancient bloodline of the Ryukyu kingdom. Yet, alongside the deafening roar of the odaiko, a quieter, much more desperate struggle for survival is occurring within the human throat. The indigenous language Uchinaguchi, systematically and aggressively suppressed for decades by mainland policies, is currently teetering on the absolute edge of total extinction. The complex phonetic structure of this language, carrying the unique, ancient cadence of the island's maritime history, is no longer the default mode of communication in the bustling markets or modern, concrete schools. The highly specific vocal mechanics required to produce its distinct syllables are rapidly fading as the elder generation passes away, taking the original names of the winds and tides with them. In response to this silent erasure, a fierce, methodical revival effort is currently underway across the prefecture. Dedicated cultural preservationists and young, urgent linguists are treating the language not as a mere academic curiosity, but as a critically endangered biological species. They are systematically recording the fading, raspy voices of the village elders, meticulously mapping the complex vocal intonations and actively forcing the ancient words back into the modern educational curriculum. They are fighting a grueling uphill and often heartbreaking battle to ensure that the original, unadulterated voice of the Sea People is not permanently silenced by the relentless, homogenizing march of modern globalization. The transition from this deeply rooted, ancient maritime culture into the brutal, hyper-competitive realities of the modern global economy has forced the Okinawan people to engineer an entirely new, complex system of daily survival. For centuries, their biological and economic existence was sustained exclusively by the violent ocean and the thin, highly alkaline, calcium-rich soil covering the limestone islands. Today, the traditional coastal communities remain locked in a perpetual, high-stakes, physical battle with the surrounding waters. The fishing industry here is not a massive industrialized factory ship operation. It is a granular, localized, and highly dangerous extraction process. Small, independent fleets operating out of concrete harbors built specifically to withstand Category 5 storms target the specific, shifting migratory paths of deep-water tuna. They navigate the treacherous, jagged, submerged coral structures that have claimed countless wooden hulls over the centuries to harvest the dense, colorful populations of reef fish. This daily, dangerous harvest is not primarily for mass export to the mainland. It is immediately absorbed into the local markets, forming the unyielding, protein-rich baseline of their physical resilience. The transition from this deeply rooted, ancient maritime culture into the brutal, hyper-competitive realities of the modern global economy has forced the Okinawan people to engineer an entirely new, complex system of daily survival. For centuries, their biological and economic existence was sustained exclusively by the violent ocean and the thin, highly alkaline, calcium-rich soil covering the limestone islands. Today, the traditional coastal communities remain locked in a perpetual, high-stakes, physical battle with the surrounding waters. The fishing industry here is not a massive, industrialized, factory ship operation. It is a granular, localized, and highly dangerous extraction process. Small, independent fleets operating out of concrete harbors built specifically to withstand Category 5 storms target the specific, shifting migratory paths of deep-water tuna. They navigate the treacherous, jagged, submerged coral structures that have claimed countless wooden hulls over the centuries to harvest the dense, colorful populations of reef fish. This daily, dangerous harvest is not primarily for mass export to the mainland. It is immediately absorbed into the local markets, forming the unyielding, protein-rich baseline of their physical resilience. Inland, the agricultural reality is equally challenging. The subtropical climate, while warm, is constantly battered by highly saline oceanic winds that severely damage delicate crops. Yet, the islanders have adapted by aggressively cultivating sugarcane. Vast, dense swaths of tall, razor-sharp cane stalks dominate the interior landscapes, bending under the relentless trade winds. The harvesting process is brutal, manual labor under a punishing sun. This cane is not simply refined into white powder. It is boiled down in massive, blistering vats into kokuto, a dense, dark, mineral-rich brown sugar that serves as a critical caloric and flavor base for their survival diet. Small, family-run plots also produce vital, indigenous crops like the fiercely tart shikwasa, citrus, and the vibrant, highly resilient purple sweet potato, beni imo. These are not luxury cash crops. They are ancient, proven, high-energy food sources capable of growing in shallow, nutrient-poor soil constantly threatened by typhoons. However, the modern era has aggressively overlaid a massive, fragile and deeply intrusive economic engine onto this ancient agricultural and maritime base: mass tourism. Millions of foreign and mainland Japanese visitors are drawn almost mechanically to the pristine white sand beaches and the globally renowned hyper-fragile coral ecosystems of the Kurama and Yaeyama island groups. The construction of massive concrete mega-resorts and world-class facilities like the Churaumi Aquarium has undoubtedly injected massive capital into the prefecture. Yet, this influx creates a highly volatile, destructive friction. The daily, localized struggle for survival is now heavily intertwined with the demands of an alien, transient population. The delicate balance between necessary economic growth and the rapid, irreversible degradation of the very natural environment that sustains them is a constant, exhausting, and often highly visible conflict. Further complicating this fragile economic reality is the massive, undeniable physical presence of United States military bases. Since the brutal conclusion of the Second World War, vast tracts of prime, flat, highly arable land on the main island have been occupied by heavy military infrastructure. While the bases inject significant capital and employment into the local economy, they represent a profound, ongoing structural restriction on the island's natural, spatial, and economic development. The daily, ear-shattering roar of fighter jets launching from heavily fortified concrete strips directly above quiet, ancient limestone villages is a constant, visceral reminder of a complex, unresolved geopolitical reality forced upon the Uchinanchu. This massive, immovable military footprint adds a heavy, metallic layer of tension to an environment already defined by extreme natural vulnerability. Okinawan cuisine is the most direct, unedited physical manifestation of this complex history and harsh environment. It is not delicate, highly refined, or artificially arranged. It is fundamentally medicinal, dense, and engineered for maximum biological endurance. The overarching culinary philosophy is Nuchi Gusui, literally translating to medicine for life. In an isolated environment where historical access to external medical supplies was practically non-existent, food was the absolute primary line of defense against disease and physical exhaustion. The diet is a hyper-efficient, highly calculated mixture of complex carbohydrates, dark, nutrient-dense leafy greens, and lean proteins extracted from the sea and the land. The absolute undisputed king of this survival diet is the pig. In a harsh environment where raising large grazing animals like cattle is geographically impossible due to the lack of vast, flat pasture land, the highly adaptable pig became the critical source of fat and protein. The Okinawan approach to pork is ruthlessly efficient. There is a common, localized saying that they consume absolutely everything except the animal's squeal. The iconic dish, rafute, perfectly illustrates this philosophy. Thick, heavy slabs of pork belly are slowly, methodically braised for hours in a dark, rich, simmering liquid of soy sauce, local awamori liquor, and dense kokuto brown sugar. The brutal, prolonged application of heat physically breaks down the tough connective tissue, rendering the fat down to a highly concentrated, energy-dense state. This is not a light appetizer. It is a heavy, caloric anchor designed to sustain grueling physical labor under a punishing sun. Equally central yet utterly contrasting in its raw, defensive nature is the Goya. This intensely bitter, deeply grooved, bright green melon is not naturally palatable. It is an acquired, aggressive taste. However, it thrives in the harsh, highly alkaline soil and relentless heat that destroys more delicate vegetables. The dish, Goya champuru, is a chaotic, pan-fried collision of this bitter melon with high-protein island tofu, eggs, and whatever meat is available. The aggressive bitterness of the Goya is actively sought after. It is scientifically proven to regulate blood sugar and stimulate the digestive system during the suffocating, humid summer months. The cuisine also violently extracts from the surrounding waters, harvesting umibudo, or sea grapes. These small, fragile, translucent green orbs are harvested from the shallow, sun-drenched coastal waters. They are not heavily cooked. They are eaten raw, delivering a sudden, sharp, briny explosion of concentrated oceanic minerals directly into the human system. These dishes are not prepared in sterile, highly mechanized commercial kitchens. They are constructed in small, unair-conditioned, highly humid family kitchens and tiny, unassuming local shokudo diners, passing down the exact, unmodified chemical formulas of survival from one generation to the next. To fully grasp the Okinawan existence, one must shift their gaze from the rugged limestone interior back to the volatile, mesmerizing boundary of the sea. Life here is not merely lived beside the ocean, it is lived in it, on it, and strictly dictated by it. The shoreline is a transition zone of breathtaking geographic diversity. On the idyllic, remote shores of Miyako Island, the sand is blindingly white, crushed coral pulverized over millennia by the relentless waves. Further south, on the exceptionally flat coral atoll of Takatomi Island, the geology reveals a microscopic wonder. The beaches here are composed entirely of tiny, star-shaped grains. These are not geological fragments, but the intricately formed exoskeletons of millions of deceased marine protozoa, known as foraminifera. Walking across this beach is physically treading upon the ancient skeletal remains of the ocean itself. For the locals, these beaches are not mere tourist attractions. They are communal living rooms, the default gathering spaces for multi-generational barbecues and quiet, nocturnal contemplation under a heavy, salt-laden breeze. Beneath the surface, the turquoise waters, particularly around the Karama Islands, reveal a fragile, highly competitive, and incredibly dense biological metropolis. Diving here is an immersive plunge into a silent, neon-lit ecosystem. The coral reefs, highly vulnerable to temperature fluctuations, harbor a staggering diversity of marine life. It is an alien landscape where microscopic, vibrantly colored nudibranchs crawl blindly across poisonous anemones, while massive, silent manta rays glide effortlessly overhead, filtering plankton from the warm Kuroshio Current. In the deeper offshore channels, the massive dark silhouettes of migrating humpback whales occasionally break the surface, their deep, resonant calls vibrating through the water column. Contrasting this expansive blue world is the claustrophobic, intense green of the Yanbaru, the ancient subtropical rainforests dominating the northern reaches of Okinawa's main island. Stepping into the Yanbaru is like entering a naturally sealed, hyper-humid greenhouse. The dense canopy completely blocks the aggressive sunlight, creating a permanent, green-tinted twilight. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, decaying massive tree ferns, and the constant, deafening mechanical drone of millions of cicadas. This isolated biosphere is the exclusive sanctuary for highly specialized endemic species, most notably the Okinawa rail. This rare, flightless bird, with its striking red beak and barred chest, navigates the dense undergrowth on foot, entirely dependent on this specific, ancient, undisturbed ecosystem for its survival. This deep, physical connection to the environment elevates into the spiritual realm within the utaki. These are highly sacred, indigenous groves scattered across the islands. They are not grandiose, built temples, but quiet, unmanicured spaces of ancient, twisting banyan roots and worn limestone where the Ryukyuan people directly commune with the elemental spirits of the land and sea. Despite its profound geographical isolation and deep-rooted ancient traditions, Okinawa is forced to operate as a highly connected, modern logistical network. The archipelago relies on an extensive, complex web of high-speed ferries and massive cargo ships to bridge the vast, turbulent gaps between the scattered islands. The daily ferry ride is an inescapable reality of Okinawan life. Standing on the rusted, salt-crusted deck, passengers feel the aggressive sting of the sea spray and watch schools of flying fish frantically skip across the deep blue swells, violently fleeing the vibrations of the ship's massive diesel engines. Remote, far-flung outposts like Ishigaki, Miyako, and the extreme western island of Yonaguni, which sits agonizingly close to Taiwan, are tethered to the mainland via small, highly exposed airstrips. The architecture of the islands is a stark, physical manifestation of a society violently caught between its ancient past and the rigid, concrete demands of modern survival. In the quiet, rural villages, traditional Okinawan dwellings stubbornly hold their ground. Their thick, heavy, red-tiled roofs are intentionally built low and aerodynamic. Perched aggressively on these roofs are the shisa, fierce, mythological lion-dog statues constructed from hardened clay, placed specifically to ward off evil spirits and the devastating winds of the typhoons. These ancient, porous coral structures sit in jarring, immediate contrast to heavily reinforced, modern concrete brutalist buildings, specifically engineered by the mainland government to withstand Category 5 storms. This creates a deeply surreal landscape. The sleek, elevated Naha monorail glides silently above massive, multi-lane expressways, while just a short boat ride away on Takatomi Island, massive, slow-moving water buffalo continue to drag wooden carts through unpaved, blindingly white sandy lanes. For the youth of Okinawa, this intense juxtaposition creates a profound, internalized psychological conflict. They are raised within a highly supportive, close-knit educational system that actively forces the preservation of their heritage, teaching the complex fingerings of the Sanshin and the grueling steps of the Aisa, dance alongside modern mathematics. Yet, the brutal economic reality of a geographically limited island forces a massive annual exodus. Lured by specialized higher education and the aggressive, anonymous, high-speed career opportunities of the mainland, thousands of young Okinawans migrate to the towering concrete canyons of Tokyo and Osaka. It is an extreme cultural shock, a transition from the slow, communal Uchina Taimu to a hyper-individualistic, mechanized metropolis. However, the deep, invisible tether of the Uchinanchu identity is incredibly strong. After years spent navigating the cold, efficient machinery of the mainland, a powerful, almost biological homing instinct activates in many. They are relentlessly drawn back across the sea. They return to the stifling humidity, the threat of typhoons, and the slower economic pace because the psychological safety of the Yuimaru community system is irreplaceable. They return to raise their children in an environment where doors remain unlocked and neighbors actively participate in child rearing. They bring back modern technological skills and global perspectives, launching highly innovative, localized ventures farm-to-table culinary operations, or modern design studios utilizing ancient Bingata patterns. The ultimate ongoing survival challenge for Okinawa is not merely weathering the physical storms, but successfully engineering a sustainable, modern economy that prevents the permanent intellectual and cultural drain of its youth, while desperately clinging to the very isolation and peace that makes the islands fundamentally unique. The daily biological rhythm of Okinawa is an intricate, inescapable study in stark physical contrasts, dictated entirely by the shifting position of the sun and the gravitational pull of the tides. The daytime is a period of intense, outward-focused physical expenditure. The brilliant, unyielding subtropical light saturates the landscape, triggering a surge of communal activity. The pristine white sand beaches transform from quiet shores into vibrant arenas of human interaction, alive with the sounds of splashing waves and the rhythmic scraping of small wooden boats being hauled onto the sand. The coastal harbours vibrate with mechanical and physical energy as the commercial fishing fleets and heavy steel tourist ferries continuously dock and depart, their heavy diesel engines churning the turquoise waters into thick, white foam. However, as the sun begins its rapid descent, painting the expansive, cloud-streaked sky in deep, bruised hues of violent orange, bruised purple, and soft pink, a profound, almost heavy silence descends upon the archipelago. The transition is not gradual, it is a sudden, physical withdrawal of energy. The evenings here are completely inwardly focused. The suffocating heat of the day lifts, replaced by a cool, dense, salt-heavy breeze flowing steadily off the Kuroshio Current. The external world is shut out behind the low coral walls, and life recalibrates around the core unit of survival, the family and the immediate neighborhood. Within the dim, warmly lit interiors of the traditional homes, multi-generational families gather around low wooden tables. This is the crucial time for the transmission of oral history, where the day's physical labors are recounted and analyzed. From a small, unassuming local izakaya, a neighborhood pub tucked into a narrow alleyway, the sharp, dry, staccato notes of a single Sanshin will inevitably drift into the humid night air. Men and women with deeply weathered faces gather here, sharing small, potent cups of local awamori liquor, their quiet conversations punctuated by sudden bursts of laughter that echo off the stone walls. As the night deepens, the villages become completely still, the silence broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical chirping of geckos hidden in the rafters and the distant, deep, percussive boom of the ocean waves crashing relentlessly against the outer barrier reefs. On the extreme outer islands, far removed from the ambient light pollution of Naha City, the night sky is not merely dark. It is overwhelmingly absolute. Looking up, the islanders are confronted with a breathtaking, dense canopy of stars, the Milky Way stretching across the blackness like a luminous scar. This nightly spectacle serves as a humbling, constant, visual reminder of their incredibly fragile place within the vast, indifferent mechanics of the universe. It is a period of essential physical and psychological restoration, repairing the communal bonds frayed by the day's labor, silently preparing the mind and body for the inevitable return of the sun and the demands of the next day. To exist in this remote island paradise is to accept a life of continuous, formidable challenges. The very geographic positioning that blesses Okinawa with its incredible biodiversity places it squarely in the devastating path of Typhoon Alley. The islanders do not view these massive, destructive storm systems as mere weather events. They are seasonal, violent, natural predators. The residents have spent centuries meticulously learning to anticipate, endure, and rebuild from these onslaughts, forging an incredibly stoic, pragmatic character. The physical isolation, while offering unparalleled psychological peace, is an exhausting logistical burden. The cost of basic biological survival can be disproportionately high, as almost all modern manufactured goods must be transported across hundreds of kilometers of open ocean. The smaller, more remote islands face the grim, silent crisis of gradual depopulation as the youth are siphoned away by the mainland's economic gravity. Simultaneously, the relentless, heavy footprint of mass tourism threatens to suffocate the fragile coral reefs through chemical runoff and physical destruction, forcing the community into a desperate, ongoing battle to monetize their environment without completely annihilating it. So, when the modern world offers the illusion of infinite ease and limitless potential, what is the invisible, unbreakable force that permanently anchors these sea people to their isolated, storm-battered rocks? The answer is not found in grand, philosophical declarations, but in the gritty, essential truths of their daily biological and social existence. They stay for the absolute, non-negotiable safety of the Yuimaru, the knowledge that if their roof is torn off in the night, their neighbors will be there at dawn to rebuild it. They stay for the unparalleled freedom to raise their children in an environment where the entire village acts as a collective parent. In an era increasingly defined by digital noise, profound social isolation, and artificial environments, Okinawa offers a rare, physical connection to reality. They stay for the deep, unshakable pride in their Ryukyuan bloodline. They stay to physically stand upon the exact same limestone bedrock that holds the bones of their ancestors, and to navigate the exact same treacherous, life-giving currents. Above all, they stay for the ocean. It is an internalized, spiritual connection that runs as deep and complex as the ancient coral reefs themselves. It is the profound, quiet realization that their identity is not just tied to the land, but dissolved into the warm, salt-laden wind. Life in Okinawa is a beautifully, painstakingly negotiated balance between the violent power of the sea and the gentle warmth of the human community, between an ancient, sovereign past and a volatile modern future. Here, the true measure of a life is not quantified by mechanical clocks or economic accumulation, but by the steady, eternal breathing of the tides, the shared warmth of a simple meal, and the quiet, enduring resilience of a people who have mastered the art of survival on the very edge of the world. Duhan trin nai ko keplai, nhung hip japkua, jai duong van se mai wang vong. Jung quen je lai sui ngikwa, ban duai fan bin luan wa tiep tuk, jong han kung shung tai trong hung chuyen ji kam, fa kach vung ja tan kung the gioi.